I forgot what I said. Hi, I'm Whitney.
And I'm Taylor. And we're the Ghost Sisters.
We're the Ghost Sisters. I was like, we're the Ghost Sisters.
Jesus Christ.
I completely forgot what I was supposed to say.
Going very well already.
Yeah.
So, today, after a long-awaited several months, well, no, actually only like 2 or 3.
Did pretty well this time.
Yeah.
We went
March 30th.
Yeah. End of March. So it's only been a couple months.
Only a couple months. And our parents are here, so if you hear some random noises, that is them.
You guys already kind of know, we talked about this with Taylor's poor decision making of picking the wrong hotel and everything. So this was that same trip.
Yeah. We went down to Corpus Christi, Texas on the weekend of March 30th. And the initial plan was to do a twofer where we would do a hotel and then the USS Lexington. And we did a ghost hunt at the USS Lexington, but it turns out...
that went well.
That went really well. It turns out I'm not allowed to book hotels anymore because I almost got us killed. You guys remember that?
I will now fact check.
Area. Yeah, when he's going to fact check me for everything. But we're finally to the point now of getting everything. Everything has been gone through. We got the history and all that stuff, so we're ready to actually present it. It's going to be a 3-parter. First part being the history, and then 2 episodes of evidence, because we ended up with a crap ton of evidence. Like, Jesus. So yeah, we're going to just start with
if you guys hear like random noise, Sophie is just pacing and panting and having a time. Sneezing and
I can definitely hear her.
Yeah, she's here. She's living her life.
We've got Sophie and Kaya, but it should be okay. They should be all right. So the USS Lexington is a Essex-class aircraft carrier that was the longest running naval ship, I guess, in the U.S. Navy. So it was brought on for World War II by the United States Navy, and it was originally going to be named the USS Cabot, but it was renamed whenever the original USS Lexington was sunk at the Battle of the Coral Sea, and it became the 5th U.S. Navy ship to bear that name in honor of the Battle of Lexington. So it's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. This ship is 820 feet long at the waterline, and it is 872 feet long overall. It has a max speed of 33 knots or 61 kilometers per hour or 38 miles per hour, depending on where you are. I knew that somebody would be like, I don't know what a knot is.
I was like, I don't know knots. And then you would say kilometers, and I'd be like, no.
I converted everything that needed conversion. So it has a range of 14,100 nautical miles at 20 knots or 16,200 miles at 23 miles per hour. So it can hold a total of 2,600 officers and enlisted men. And as we found out as we went through the Lexington, that includes officers, soldiers, cooks, doctors, dentists, barbers, like anything.
Everything.
It's basically a little town on the ocean, which is really cool.
They do have,
you're good.
I don't know if we're already there yet, but they have like a post office in there, and they had to put a sign on there that says not a working post office because I guess people were trying
dropping
to
mail in there. Yeah.
But
yep. Armament, it had 12 5-inch or 127 millimeter dual-purpose guns, which means that they engage both surface and air targets. And then it had 32 40 millimeter or 1.6-inch anti-aircraft guns, and then 46 20 millimeter or 0.8-inch anti-aircraft guns.
Those are the ones that you one person sits and one person steers?
Those are the dual-purpose guns.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So on the ship, they do have 2 of those that are set up. That one of them you can actually get in and move it. And apparently if you push the pedals, it'll make sounds like it's firing. So we saw a couple of kids on there that we were like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
So,
like,
yeah.
The whole time.
Armor-wise, this is going to be how thick the hull is. The waterline belt is anywhere between 2.5 to 4 inches. The deck is 1.5 inches. The hangar deck is 2.5 inches. And then the bulkheads are 4 inches each, which is...
What?
Super thin.
What?
Yeah. But when you think about it, we walked past areas where the ship was open, and you could tell that those Those walls are really thin.
There are also, I guess that makes sense, because there are also parts where you can look down and see below you.
Yeah, I had a really hard time with that. We'd be walking and I'd look down and I'd be like, Whitney, you can see the ocean.
And I was like, just keep walking, it's fine.
It holds quite a few aircraft. It held 36 Grumman F-6F Hellcat. These were produced from 1942 to 1945 and have a top speed of 380 miles per hour, 43-foot wingspan, and they have a range, meaning this is how far they can go before needing to fuel up again, of 944.5 miles. It also held 36 Douglas SBD Dauntlesses, which is the aircraft that we saw on there whenever you first walk into the hangar.
Okay.
It was produced from 1940 to 1944. It has a top speed of 255 miles per hour with a 42-foot wingspan and has a range of 1,205 miles. And then 18 Grumman TBF Avengers, which entered service in 1942 and weren't retired until the 1960s. So these were around for a while. And then 275 mile per hour top speed with a 54-foot wingspan at 1,000 mile range. So that's just kind of an overview of, and kind of gives you an idea of how big this ship is. It took us, we were on there for 8 hours and we didn't go to the same place twice, aside from the volunteer room. And even then there were lots of parts of the ship that we didn't even go into. Yeah. But
big ship.
Yes.
George was saying that the that main deck, whenever you like walk in, that it could hold like hundreds of planes.
Yeah.
And the wings would actually like fold up. And so it looked like one of those cranes.
And they actually had one that was fold up.
Yeah, they had one to kind of like, it had its full wing out on one side and then the other one was pulled up.
Yeah. And it shows you really clearly how it was such a space saver. Like,
yeah. And he said that they just packed them on there and then they would put them on the elevator, send them up, and then they'd fly off. Wow. So
we're going to go through the timeline, basically what this ship went through. It went through a lot. And get ready to hear a bunch of terms you never heard before, because I was looking stuff up left and right because I had no idea what a lot of this meant.
So this is like a term paper? She's so mad.
We had so many people unsubscribe right there. This ship was ordered on September 9th of 1940, and it was laid down. This means that it was the formal recognition of the start of ship construction by the Four Rivers Shipyard in Quincy, Massachusetts on July 15th of 1941. It was officially launched, which means that it was transferred from land to water for the first time on September 23rd, 1942, and was sponsored by Mrs. Theodore Douglas Robinson.
I love that it was sponsored, but for some reason I thought you were going to say like Baskin Robbins. And I was like, fuck yeah!
So
let's do it.
I had to look up what sponsored meant because I was like, surely it doesn't mean sponsored in the way we mean it today. It was a female civilian that is invited to bestow good luck and divine protection on the ship, which was basically the christening of a new ship.
So is she kind of like the equivalent of like the like mermaid at the front of a pirate ship?
I don't know.
What made her so special?
I don't know. Like, I don't know if you had to enter a contest or if like you knew somebody that was like, hey, you want to christen the ship? And she was like, bet. Okay. Like, I have no idea. So,
hey, what are you doing on Tuesday? Want to christen a ship?
Christen a ship. It was commissioned, which means that it was placed in active service on February 17th of 1943. And this is where we start to get into all of the different things that the Lexington went into. Its first captain in command was Captain Felix Stump, and it went through its initial shakedown cruise, which was a performance of the ship, like the performance of the ship was tested, in the Caribbean, and then it went to join the Pacific Fleet through the Panama Canal. And very quickly in the shakedown cruise, it had its first casualties. 1939, there was the Heisman Trophy winner, Niall Kinnick. He played college football for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He was doing his flaming... What?
She's whooping.
Oh, whooping?
Because my dad went.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it was like, because
none of us have
went to
done
Iowa. But
okay, that makes sense. Okay, so whoop whoop. All right. Good job, Warren. Good job. So... he was conducting training flights off of her deck, and he was flying a Grumman F4F Wildcat, which had a very serious oil leak, while it was airborne, and he was unable to return to the Lexington. And he ended up crashing into the sea 4 miles from the ship. Neither him nor his plane were recovered.
Oh.
So already off to a bit of a rough start there. But oddly enough, like, casualties are kind of, I mean, obviously it went through a war. There's going to be casualties and that kind of thing. But for a warship, I feel like there weren't a whole lot. Like, there's a list of people that died on the boat, and there's a lot of them. But, you know, considering this thing was hit by torpedoes and a kamikaze attack and all that kind of stuff, it's really not as bad as I thought it would be.
Now, was he, like, a service member
Yes.
at the time? Okay, I didn't know, since it was, like, its first thing, if it was just like, oh, we got volunteers to come on the ship. I mean, obviously, he had to know how to fly the plane, but I didn't know if it was just, like, he managed to know how, that it wasn't, like, part of the service.
Right.
I mean, history has done some weird shit, so, okay.
But no, he was an active serviceman. He was part of the U.S. Navy.
Okay.
And, so they arrived at Pearl Harbor on August 9th of 1943 and participated in a series of raids. And I was like, what does that mean? They were protecting against raids from the Japanese. The late September was going to be a raid on the Tarawa Air Base, which is in the Gilbert Islands, which is in the Central Pacific. And unfortunately, I don't have a better way of telling you where that is, because it's literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and there's no markers around it to tell you where. October, they went to Wake Island, which is in the Northwest Pacific Ocean. And then they returned to Pearl Harbor to prepare for what was known as the Gilbert Island Operation, which ultimately became known as the Gilbert and Marshall Islands Campaign. This was from August 1942 through February 1944. And obviously they came into this, you know, it didn't even start doing stuff till 1943. So they came into this a little bit later. This was a series of battles that were between the U.S. and Japan, and it was an attempt in U.S.'s realm to establish airfields and naval bases that would allow for support across the entire Central Pacific. Because at this point, Japan has pulled us into the war, and we're basically like, screw you, Japan, we're going to do what we need to.
And Josh Hartnett took a break from Hollywood for a while. No? No one? Okay. Thanks,
Josh
Dad.
Hartnett?
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor. Dude just made a comeback. I want to see that movie. Not a big, like, M. Night Shyamalan fan, but, like, he's back.
Okay. I was like, we're talking about the same Josh Hartnett, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
And he, like, pieced out, I think, maybe not Sin City. Yeah, Sin City.
Okay.
He was at, like, the very beginning of that. And then he, like, dropped off the face of everything.
Okay. I didn't know he was back.
Now
I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's okay. So, November 19th through 24th, they flew sorties in the Marshalls, and I had to look up what a sortie was. This is a group of soldiers that are sent on a specific mission. So basically, you guys go check out this area, you guys go check out this area.
See, I feel like a sortie would be like, we don't quite have a job for you yet. Like, we're sort of on board. We
Right.
sort of are hiring you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I guess not.
Yeah. So they ended up downing 29 enemy aircraft on November 23rd and 24th alone. So,
Damn.
yeah. The next one is the Kwajalein raid. I even wrote out how to say that and then was like, So, December 4th, they sailed to the Kwajalein Atoll or atoll, however you say it, in the Marshall Islands to participate in a raid. And the morning strike destroyed the SS Kimbu Maru, which was Japan's. It damaged 2 cruisers and accounted for 30 enemy aircraft. And what was kind of neat about accounted for just means that it downed.
No,
30.
I know.
Okay.
It was kind of neat. No, I was like, we're talking about like.
No. Not this. This wasn't kind of neat. It was kind of, I say neat. Whenever you go on the ship, they have counts, like little images on there to symbolize how many Japanese ships or aircraft were downed.
They
by
had it
the
for not just Japanese, it was for
everything.
A bunch of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like for each country it had different, like, I guess submarines and other ships, and
they had special
planes and
special symbols for kamikaze and all that kind of stuff. And I know I'm saying that wrong. Kamikaze is, I think, how you're supposed to say it. Sorry for anybody who's Japanese. But that was just something that George pointed out to us, Nancy and George pointed out to us. The gunners splashed 2 of the enemy torpedo planes, and I was like, I don't know what that means. It means an air-to-air kill or weapons impact on a ground target.
Oh,
So,
definitely not.
not
I was
cute.
thinking it dips down and dips its wing and it's like splash.
Yeah.
Splashes it.
No, it's not that at all. This was the first big thing that went wrong at the Lexington. The gunners at the USS Lexington were ordered not to open fire at night by their Admiral Charles Pownall because he thought that it would give away their position.
Fair.
I'm gonna preface this with he was quickly replaced after this incident.
Oh.
So at 1920, which is 7:20 p.m. for us civilians, a major attack occurred while the task force was underway off of Kwajalein, and this just means that they were doing something off of the coast of Kwajalein. At 23:22 or 11:22 p.m., Japanese parachute flares from the planes began to appear, and 10 minutes later, they were hit by a torpedo on the starboard side, which knocked out all of the steering gear. So this was because they noticed, they were being attacked, and the captain or the admiral basically told them, no, you're not allowed to fire because it'll give away our position. Well, they clearly know where we are. So,
see, I could understand if it was like you saw the plane up there and they weren't attacking you, but you saw it go by and you're like, no, I'm not going to shoot at it, because then they know where I am.
Right.
But if they're actively attacking me, like, fight back.
Exactly. Yeah. During this, 9 people were killed, 2 were on the fantail, and 7 were in the chief petty officer's mess room. And as I started reading more into this, basically the mess room was serving as a repair party station during general quarters. General quarters is whenever the ship is at its most ready. Basically, there are 3 different commands that you can get in general quarters is like, stuff's going down, you need to get into your stations and get ready to react. So at first I thought, so George and Nancy told us a story about one guy that he attributes his survival of a attack like this, a torpedo attack, to the fact that he was more worried about his sandwich than going out and checking.
It was a kamikaze.
Was it a kamikaze?
Yeah, because it was all the other captains went up onto the deck because they heard things, and so they went up onto the deck, and the other guy was like, dude, I just want my sandwich, man.
Okay.
And so he stayed down, but it was 4 of them, I believe.
Okay.
They died in that attack.
Because I was trying to figure out if that was that story, because the more I read into this, they said 4 members of the repair party survived because they were sitting on a couch that absorbed the shockwave.
Huh.
I was like,
that's kind of...
this couch is coming home with me kind of thing. So
that's really why I sit on the couch.
Yeah,
and watch
totally.
TV all days.
Yeah.
To impending attacks.
Yes. To absorb torpedo shockwaves.
Among other shockwaves.
Basically, the tanks at the back, which is aft of the ship, were ruptured, and there was lots of smoke pouring out of it. They managed to seal the damaged compartments and weld them shut and put heavy steel plates where they needed to in order to keep the ship watertight. And then they were able to create an emergency hand-operated steering unit because their steering is shot. So they created an emergency steering unit to get the ship back to Pearl Harbor. December 9th, it received emergency repairs, and then it went further on to Bremerton, Washington on December 22nd for full repairs. Those were not completed until February 20th of 1944. So this thing went through some serious damage. Now, it was determined that not firing at night was an error in judgment and should never be repeated, and it was never repeated. They quickly replaced the admiral that had requested that, and gun crews were ordered to open fire anytime the ship came under attack. So, good move. Now,
I feel like it shouldn't have been.
I know. I feel like that's common sense. But granted, I mean, this is the first time you get, this is really, World War I? It wasn't like this. So,
was it just on land?
They had warships, but it wasn't like...
Well, but mine's not even like, what was this, the first instance that we had issues like, if someone is shooting at you,
shoot back at them.
Shoot back. It shouldn't have been a question.
Right. So this is the first instance that the USS Lexington was falsely reported as sunk. And this was by the Tokyo Rose propaganda newspaper, I guess, that basically said, oh, we hit it with a torpedo, it must have sank. Mm-hmm. This happens many times. They think the thing sunk and it didn't. And this is actually how the ship got its name, the Blue Ghost, because it's painted blue so that it camouflages better with the water. But the Japanese were being told that this thing sunk, and then they would see it in the next battle and be like, why the hell is this thing still here? So they would sink it again, and it would come back the next battle. So then the U.S., when they learned that they were calling it the Blue Ghost, they adopted it as its official nickname to kind of demoralize the Japanese. Like, no matter what you do to this ship, it's never going down.
And because George was saying it was a big thing as far as the Japanese didn't know first whether or not they had actually sank it, or if the U.S. was just cranking out these battleships that quick. And so they just didn't know if they were like, well, I sink this one, and they just rebuild it and bring it back. Or they're just like, it's a ghost. It's a ghost.
It's a ghost. So the next big battle was going to be the Battle of the Philippine Sea. And there are lots of names that I had no idea how to pronounce, and I did my best to go to howtopronounce.com, so I tried. Spaghetti. The Rear Admiral Mitscher, and I hope I'm saying that right, took command of Task Force 58 on the 8th of March when the Lexington returned to Majuro. And this task force was also known as the Fast Carrier Task Force, which maintained striking force in the U.S. Navy from January 1944 through September 1945. And he claimed the Lexington as his flagship. This is basically the ship that carried him and flew his flag that set his rank, or the command ship for a group of naval ships. This supported arming landings in Hollandia. It's currently named Jayapura, so I don't know where that is either. I don't know. That was on April 13th. It raided Truk on April 28th. And again, if I'm saying any of these wrong, I'm very sorry. She was attacked but untouched, and her plane splashed 17 enemy fighters, and the Japanese propaganda once again announced her as sunk. Then there was a surprise strike on Saipan on June 11th that eliminated almost all of the air opposition over the island and then battered it from air for the next 5 days. June 16th, they fought off an attack from the Japanese torpedo bombers of Guam. It was unhurt, but it was reported as sunk a third time by the Japanese propaganda. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was officially June 19th through the 20th, and it ended with the victory in what was called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Basically, I think they felt like these guys were kind of sitting ducks, and they just kind of came in and wiped them all out, and it was a very clear victory. The U.S. didn't really struggle in this. All in all, 300 enemy aircraft were destroyed on the first day. The second day, a carrier, a tanker, and a destroyer were sunk, and it nearly knocked the entire Japanese naval aviation out of the war. So, damn, it was a serious thing. They continued to do sorties over Guam and against the Paulus and Bonins from Inuiatuk Naval Base. Had to look that one up. They came to the Carolinas on September 7th for 3 days of strikes about Yap and Ulithi. And then that was followed by attacks on Mindanao. And then in the Visayas, again, lots of names I'm hoping that I'm saying correctly. Then along the west coast of Luzon, and attacks that ultimately came on in Leyte. And they stay in Leyte for a little while because there's another battle there. They went to Okinawa on October 10th, and then they did an attack there. They went to Formosa for 2 days to destroy bases and stuff like that. So they came out unscathed from all of these attacks. Lexington at this point is just doing the damn thing. Next one was the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and they came back to Leyte for this battle, which was a naval victory of America over Japan. There was a lot of enemy fire, but it was not damaged in the main battle. It was instead damaged after this. The aircraft of the Lexington served in the Battle of the Sibuyan Sea, which helped to sink the Japanese super battleship Musashi and hit 3 cruisers on October 24th. One of these was the Myoko, which was hit with a torpedo, and the 2 escort destroyers that were taking her along, I guess. I guess all of them have escorts that help move them. Those 3 ships were completely removed from battle.
Damn.
The next day, they had the Battle of Cape Engano against the Japanese aircraft carriers. This sank the light carriers of Chitose and Chiyoda, or it crippled Chiyoda. The aircraft alone sank the Ziokaku. And the Ziokaku is important because that was the ship that originally sank the USS Lexington at the Battle of Coral Sea. So,
Suck it.
Yeah, so it was kind of like the Lexington was getting revenge on the original Lexington. So it also sank...
Getting revenge on the original Lexington?
Getting revenge for the original Lexington, yeah. Along with the Intrepid, it sank the Zuiho. So many names I can't pronounce. Now, here is where we start to see a lot of casualties. On November 5th, they were off of the coast of Lujan whenever an aircraft sank the heavy cruiser Nachi with 4 torpedo hits. Like really soon after that, there was a kamikaze strike that landed on the USS Lexington. And there were names that came up, and I can't remember if Ronald was one of them. Was he one in the USS Lexington? I'm sorry, in the kamikaze?
I
don't remember, because I couldn't remember with Ronald either. But Irving Klein?
No.
Ronald was just I thought he was a torpedo.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, so
it's either him or Irvin.
Irving was the kamikaze.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, then Ronald would be.
Okay,
you don't have the audio from?
I do. I just don't remember.
Okay,
that wasn't any spiritually active time. So
yeah, I was gonna say they explained it.
Yeah,
to us.
Yeah, so. And I know we're tossing a lot of names around that you guys don't know about yet. They'll be explained whenever we get to the evidence section. The blazes that were brought on to the Lexington at this point were put under control within 20 minutes, and it was able to continue fighting with normal flight action. They shot down another kamikaze that was heading for Ticonderoga, and then they came to Ulithi for repairs on November 9th. This was the last time that the Japanese claimed it was sunk again. In all, 50 people were killed and 132 people were wounded in this kamikaze strike. Damn. December 11th, it did a raid at Luzon and Formosa for the first 9 days of January 1945. And then it moved to South China Sea for a strike against Han, Cam Ranh Bay, Indochina, which is part of Hong Kong, Pescadores, and Formosa. It sank 4 merchant ships, 4 escorts, and 1... I can't talk. It sank 4 merchant ships, 4 escorts, and 1 convoy, and at least 12 in another at Cam Ranh Bay on January 12th. Then this is where, so there's not a lot documented about these. It's just kind of here's where it went this day, so it's going to be kind of rapid fire. It sailed to Formosa in Okinawa on the 21st and 22nd of January. Then on February 16th and 17th, it hit the airfields near Tokyo to minimize the opposition for the Iwo Jima landings. So we're getting towards the end of the war. Mm-hmm. February 19th and 22nd, through the 22nd, it flew close to support assaulting troops and then did strikes against the Japanese home islands, which are the main islands of Japan, and then Nansei Shoto before heading to the Puget Sound. And then this is where we get to the end of the war. There was a Rear Admiral named I have his full name here, Thomas L. Sprague, who had a task force and claimed the Lexington as his flagship again, I believe. No, the Lexington was just part of his task force. So it was attacking the Japanese home islands from July 15th until the Japanese surrendered. They attacked Honshu, Hokkaido, Yokosuka, and Kure. It continued to fly patrols over Japan after they surrendered. And there was a Lieutenant Commander Lester Wall Jr., who was given a Distinguished Flying Cross for his mission to locate and lead supply drops to prisoner of war camps in Honshu that were abandoned by the Japanese. So it's kind of a good thing that came out of that. Huh. And then it was used to ferry home the servicemen in what was known as Operation Magic Carpet.
Aww.
And they arrived back in the U.S. on December 16th in San Francisco. Now, at this point, the ship is decommissioned from the first time, which means that it was removed from active service. On April 23rd of 1947, it was entered into the National Defense Reserve Fleet, and then it hung out in the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in September of 1953. And then it was recommissioned, which means that it was put back into active service on August 14th, 1955, and Captain A.S. Hayward Jr. was in command. It hung out mostly in San Diego, but it would also go down to Corpus Christi during this time. Yes. May of 1956, it sailed for a 6-month deployment with the 7th Fleet, which it did several times. It would go out with the 7th Fleet quite a bit. And it was based off of Yokosuka for exercises, maneuvers, and search and rescues. Came back to San Diego December 20th. Then it trained an Air Group 12, from June 1st to October 17th as the flagship of Rear Admiral H.D. Riley, commander of Carrier Division 1. So many names and so many dates. This is whenever the Second Taiwan Strait Crisis occurred, and it was ordered to embark on July 14th of 1958 with the Air Group 21 at San Francisco to reinforce the 7th Fleet. It returned on December 19th, so it was away for about 6 months. And it had several deployments up until its Far East tour in the 1960s, so it was kind of back and forth a lot. Now, it resumed duty as an attack carrier during the Cuban Missile Crisis and relieved the Antietam on December 29th of 1962. It operated primarily in Pensacola and Corpus Christi as a training facility for both active duty and reserve naval aviators, and it prepared men essentially for Vietnam. Now, this leads us to the first female death on the ship. Females were not allowed to be on the ship, period, up until August 18th of 1980. They became the first aircraft carrier in the U.S. naval history to have a woman aboard as crew members. October 29th, 1989, there was a woman named Lisa Mayo. She was 25 years old. She was from Oklahoma City, and she was part of the flight deck crew that caught planes as they came in. Now, there was a student naval aviator that lost control of his aircraft after he aborted an attempt to land on the flight deck. So he's in training, trying to figure out how to do this. The aircraft ended up inverting and hit what they call the island. The actual flight deck is called the island. It hit the island with its left wing, and it killed 4 crew members and 1 civilian maintenance worker, injured 7. The pilot was one of the included, and Lisa Mayo was considered the first woman casualty of the USS Lexington. She is actually, we're going to hear about her again and actually hear from her again a little bit.
Her name comes up.
Yeah, and she responds. She responds to our questions and stuff quite a bit towards the end of the third part of this.
I'm just amazed that it took until 1989 for a female.
Well, 1980. Yeah, 1980.
Well, the 80s.
And then for a female to actually be killed, it took 9 years.
Right.
For that.
I mean, yeah, in the 80s.
Yeah. I was surprised at how. And I actually have a picture of Lisa.
Oh, okay.
I was able to find a picture of her, so we can post that on the Instagram whenever we post this. But like I said, she's being featured in Women of the Navy. Oh. And
it's a new exhibit that they're about to.
Yeah, they're finishing
on it. Yeah.
Yes, and she's going to be one of the
Women of the Navy.
Featured. And there's something really kind of touching tied to that we'll get into. Yeah. So it was officially decommissioned again, and then it was stricken, which means that it was removed from the Naval Vessel Register by the Secretary of the Navy on recommendation from the Chief of Naval Operations on November 8th, 1991. This is basically it saying it is no longer going to be active duty, period. This marked it as the longest active service life than any other Essex-class ship in the history of the Navy. So, yeah.
That's cool. Awesome.
It was donated to Corpus Christi, Texas as a museum ship after the decommissioning on June 15th of 1992, after being turned over to the city of Corpus Christi on November 26, 1991. And it now operates as the USS Lexington Museum of the Bay, and it is very well maintained. They are currently restoring areas that are off limits. For example, the kamikaze attack area is being restored. They said right now it's really...
The
torpedo area. I keep getting them flip-flop.
Yeah. I was no, kamikaze was on deck.
Yeah.
Or on the island.
Yeah. Yeah, the torpedo area, they said that right now it's a wooden hatch is what's separating it from things, and
It's
it's still very dangerous to walk around.
But
and
they're
stuff.
working on it.
Yeah,
so
they're working on it. Basically, they said that they just kind of sectioned off that part of the ship and just never used it again. So that's why it's still being restored. But it was really cool because when we walked on deck, on the hangar deck, they have a big sheet up and you can look inside of it, and they're restoring one of the airplanes.
Taylor.
So, shut up.
I was like, oh, cool. They're like restoring a plane. And she was like, wow. And then she walks over and she looks in the plastic and she's like, holy shit, there's a plane in here. And I was like, what the fuck? What did you think it
I'm
was?
not an
Did you
observational
not hear
person.
what I said?
Yeah. So it was added to the official historical preservation areas on July 31st of 2003. And that is a very glossed over history of the USS Lexington. And yeah,
If you guys are one, into ghosts, and two, like history, definitely ask for George and Nancy, and George will tell you everything.
Oh yeah, they had so much information, and I was recalling.
He said that he really liked World War II battleships.
Yes.
And so that's what he likes, and so he just learned everything that he could about it and all the different flights and planes and everything. So he just is a walking encyclopedia
basically.
World War II ship. Yep.
So that's going to wrap up our history of the USS Lexington, and stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to go through our first round of evidence, and then, of course, our third episode where we're going to go through our last bit of evidence. Woo-hoo. So
It's exciting.
it is.
And we'll spook you bitches soon.
Spooky bitches zone. Okay, bye.
Bye.